Ladies and gentlemen, we've got another update regarding Russia, Ukraine. We're looking at negotiations potentially happening soon, at least according to this recent Trump post where he talks about the situation with Russia. He just had a phone call with Putin. He says in this, they discussed Russia, the Middle East, energy, AI, the power of the dollar, various other subjects, talking about the great history of their nations, working together in World War II, losing men, and yada yada yada. And then he says Putin even used Trump's very strong campaign motto of common sense. We both believe strongly in it. We agree to work together very closely, including visiting each other's nations. And this is the big thing. We have also agreed to have our respective teams start negotiations immediately, and we'll begin by calling President Zelensky of Ukraine to inform him of the conversation, something I will be doing right now. And the negotiations will be headed, it looks like, by Marco Rubio, Ratcliffe, and others. And so, obviously, not much more to it. We're very interested to hear kind of how these initial negotiations will set up in terms of the potential annexation of land within Ukraine by Russia, because I do have the map that's recently pulled up here. You can see all of this area is right now under control of Russia. You can see Crimea was already annexed, but all this other area part of their invasion. And then this is the small strip, this purple strip of land that right now Ukraine has in Russia. And so that's why if you saw those headlines of Zelensky saying, well, let's trade the land that we have of yours, we'll give that back to you if you give us back the two eastern regions down here. Obviously, if you look at the size comparison, that's simply not going to happen. This map is kind of annoying because it has this like other shade of red. I don't know why, but the darker red, this is the area specifically right here, not including Crimea, because Crimea was in 2014. This area right here, and it looks like also a little bit over here along that line, this is the area that would be potentially annexed. The question is, would Putin demand more land, potentially taking even more into the middle of Ukraine in a negotiation process? And where is his military right now in terms of asking for something like that? Because you would think, based on everything that we've heard, this has not been a very positive war for Russia. Now, of course, they can very easily spin it because Russia is a lot more powerful than Ukraine, and the only reason Ukraine has not been taken over is because of NATO propping up Ukraine, and it looks like because of Trump's relationship with Putin, that's going to end at least to a degree. And it'll be interesting to see what Russia wants in these negotiations. There was the initial talk right after Trump won. Remember, they started using the longer range ballistic missiles. It was, well, yes, the areas that right now Russia controls are going to be annexed. The question is, are they going to get more land? And then there is going to be a demilitarized zone that's going to be helped controlled by potentially NATO troops. Hopefully not American. It would be European NATO troops in a demilitarized zone in between. It's the borders of Russia and Ukraine. And the idea is, obviously, if you're the United States moderating this, you don't want Russia to do a land grab, rearm, and then just reinvade again. Which, honestly, based on Russia and their invasion against Ukraine and just how it went, I don't really think they would do that. I think they're probably pretty happy with the areas that they control right now. The question is, do they want any more in a negotiation process, and do they have the leverage to get more land? And also, when you look at what just happened with Trump and the new policy change to where if the United States is going to pay for war support for Ukraine, we're going to need some form of natural resources back in the process, which you would figure would give Russia more leverage in a negotiation against Ukraine. Although I did see that Ukraine potentially has agreed to do that with Trump. I'm guessing that's just because they know Zelensky knows the negotiations are coming. Remember, Zelensky has already said negotiations are going to be happening. They're ready to do it. So both sides are ready. The question is, how far off in terms of the negotiation process are they? The initial talk that Zelensky had in terms of what he wanted to do is completely preposterous. And I'm not trying to be a Russian shill. I'm just saying, if you've got all of this land, why would you trade all of this land for this little sliver? It just doesn't make any sense. So that's just not going to be happening. I'm just wondering if Putin is going to want even more outside of the already occupied land that he has right now. And could he potentially have more leverage to ask for it because of the situation right now with the United States and Ukraine, and with the Trump administration in? And it does seem like Trump and Putin are relatively on the same page. And that's something that during Trump's first term was really good, because you've got an adversary like Russia. It's good to be on even ground with them in terms of, we know Russia has a massive, nuclear warhead chest, and it's a situation to where the media realized it pretty early on that Trump and Putin were getting along, and so that's why they immediately started to say, well, it's actually Trump is a Russian shill, and because they knew, it was like, well, this is good news for Trump. He's getting along with Putin. They're a huge adversary. They're very powerful in terms of their nuclear arsenal. This is going to help Trump. So let's swing it and say, oh no, it's actually Trump who's controlled by Putin. And so that's the exact same thing they're going to do with this. When some type of peace deal gets worked out, they understand that a normie will look at the situation and be like, that's amazing. This is exactly what we want. Trump had a very peaceful presidency from 2017 to 2021. Nothing crazy happened. We get the two huge wars in 2022. And then Trump comes back in, and immediately, I mean, we'll see what happens with Israel-Palestine, because now apparently they're not going to Hamas is not giving back the hostages, which could be a big issue in terms of Middle East escalation. I'm not sure what Trump's going to do there with Israel, but if you end that situation within the next 4 or 5 months, you end this situation, it's going to look really good. So there's going to be an immediate spin, especially if Russia gets land, that, oh, it's just appeasement to Russia. And it's like Nazi Germany 2.0. That's what they're going to start saying, which obviously, if you know the historical context of this, it's not even close to the same thing. But I'm just saying that's the narrative they're going to spin, because Trump is able to get along with Putin and really also get along with Zelensky. I mean, but Zelensky has no choice when it comes to the United States. They just have no leverage in that situation. They need all the help they can get. You can't really play hardball with someone like Trump, the president of the United States, when you rely on NATO, and you do have better technology than Russia because of NATO to fight this war. So this will be interesting to see how this plays out in terms of this initial phase of the negotiations and what exactly Russia will want. You can't really trust what Putin says. You can't, anytime these guys are making statements to the public, it's like, obviously saying that there's going to be negotiations is one thing. It's like, they're not going to really lie about that. But in terms of just Putin saying certain things, wanting the war to be over, yeah, he probably wants the war to be over if he gets a bunch of things in return, considering this war it's been deemed kind of as a failure. And if you're Putin, you need to spin this in terms of propaganda and getting some sort of land in exchange. And the problem is, people are like, well, you're rewarding Putin for an invasion. You shouldn't be doing that. Well, no, I understand. The problem is, the only way you get this land back right here is with a NATO invasion, which obviously would be very likely World War III, which is off the table. So getting that land back is basically off the table, unless there's some type of crazy economic squeeze that the West would try and put onto Russia, which honestly I'm not even sure they can do based on what Russia controls right now. And it wouldn't happen anyways, because Trump gets along with Putin. The only way that would happen there were sanctions, significant sanctions on Russia when Biden did it, and also pretty much all the European Western countries. Listen, you're not getting that land back. It's just based off of the situation in terms of how powerful Russia is versus Ukraine. It's going to be very hard to. You would have to somehow give Ukraine the adequate support to try and take the land back, which is extremely risky in and of itself because of the nuclear arsenal that Russia has. So this is going to be a negotiating period, it looks like, at least according to Trump. He's called Putin. He's going to I'm guessing by now he's called Zelensky as well. And it's going to be facilitated with Rubio and others from the United States. And we will have to see what both sides ends up wanting. There's probably going to be a demilitarized zone somewhere within the separation of the border between Russia and Ukraine. It's just, where does the new border get drawn? And this is just how it works. People need to understand. Listen, if any liberal tells you, well, no, it's appeasement, you should get that land back. So, they're endorsing World War III is what they're doing. There's no possible way Ukraine troops, no matter how much support they get from NATO, and trust me, NATO under Biden was giving them a ton of support. The United States was giving them a ton of support. You're not getting that land back unless you somehow through NATO, usurp Russia in terms of them getting really scared over their situation, which is hard for it requires escalation is what it does to get that land back. It requires escalation. I mean, technically NATO could try and do it, but is that really worth risking World War III to this degree? It's just not. So I'm just telling you, this is the situation. I'm not saying, oh, it's good for countries to land grab, but I mean, you have to end this at some point. And I think it is good to see kind of how this played out from just a zoom out perspective. They tried to take over Ukraine. They really couldn't do it. I mean, sure, NATO helped Ukraine, but I mean, that goes to show you Russia, their nuclear warheads are a lot more powerful than their military. And that's how it is with every country now. But I'm just saying, just looking at this, we'll have to see in terms of these negotiations. And Hegseth said, well, the 2014 borders, there's no way it can go back to that. I mean, that's impossible unless you want more escalation. It's not possible to go back to it. I don't even think the European countries want that, honestly. I don't know what the European country... It's impossible to say what these countries want, because how do you drive Russia back to the original, the 2022 borders, unless you involve NATO troops? I'm wondering... It requires war escalation. That's what it requires to drive the Russians back. And so... It's not, listen, you look at how Ukraine, it'll just be interesting to see how much land they end up taking from, there's Kiev right there, how much land they end up taking from Ukraine. This is the land that they have. So we will have to see, but either way, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.